Ironically, this is I think the shortest episode of Nydal that I've done so far, but in terms of hours and the amount of work and progress that I was able to make, it's probably one of the biggest ones, because we're going to be working on the suburbs. I'm guessing that's something many of you have been waiting for. Statistically speaking, I can say that about anything. If I do a military base, I'm sure there's a lot of people waiting for me to do that. So I digressed. What we're going to be starting working on is the expansion of this corner of the city that I didn't necessarily show it on camera before. I kind of did it sort of off camera, that avenue extension over there. But at this point, I decided that it would be nice to start bridging the gap between the two sides of the city. Obviously, we're going to be expanding towards the other side in future episodes. The suburbs in this episode, however, are going to take place on the hill that I'm currently, terraforming with roads. It will be a nice way to put it, or appropriate way to put it. I want this road to sort of loop around this island and connect to the industrial area right below the bridge. Hopefully you're getting a bit of an idea of what I'm, or at least where I'm trying to build this this thing right here. I'm trying to sort of contour using the shape of the mountain. I don't want to terraform the whole thing, though I am going to terraform quite a bit of it. It's still going to be a hill. It's still going to be a little bit higher than anything else around it, but I certainly wanted this this hill to be a little bit lower in terms of height. I mentioned this in the previous episode, how the height difference, it didn't look super realistic before, and this is going to be way more evident as I start putting down houses. Of course, I'm not zoning anything. Everything is manually plopped. Everything so far in this series has been manually plopped. A question that I've been getting a lot is which mod I use for that. I use a mod called Plop the Grovels. I don't use Rico anymore. I don't have Rico enable in this save game. And I think I'm actually subscribed to a lot of Rico buildings that I recently learned that they don't show up and find it if you don't have Rico, which is kind of unfortunate because I really don't want to use Rico as it's meant to be used. I just want the buildings to be able to be plopped. I thought Find It was would just allow me to do that, but I might have to actually get Rico and unlock all these buildings that I'm actually subscribed, and they're probably loaded in memory and everything, except I just can't see them in the menu. So just something to keep in mind. In terms of road layout, this there's a lot of cul-de-sacs in general, I noticed when I was doing research for this episode. And by research, I mean just looking at different neighborhoods of different countries in Google Maps. Roads tend to be a little bit on the thinner side. And since we're so close to the main city here, I decided to keep it a bit more dense. Suburbs are going to start expanding and be less dense as they branch out of the city. But since we're still very much close to the city center and we're on top of a hill, I'm still going to have, buildings that are 1-2 stories high. And as we go away up into the hill, there's just going to be just, one floor type of house. Continuing with the expansion of education that we did in the previous episode, and I sound like a politician suddenly, but we're going to be putting a lot of schools. Actually, we're going to be putting a hospital on that little corner on the middle part of the screen right now. There's going to be a tiny hospital that's going to be clipped in with a whole bunch of crematoriums, because obviously because they belong together. I mean, do I really have to even explain it? But again, I'm getting ahead of myself. I mean, this is a short episode, so I don't know how much out that is. For the most part, I was trying to integrate these roads as best as possible. And I wanted to have that semi-pedestrian road on the side of the school because there's going to be a lot of children walking in and out. Now, this avenue right here, I'm not a huge fan of how the vanilla avenues look like, but these were the most complete ones without having to resource from one in the workshop. There are some people that offered, I can't really disclose that because I haven't, seen them or I don't know if they're actually going to happen. I'm pretty sure they will, but there's some people who are working on custom roads for Nydal, which is kind of awesome. If you're watching this, the person who's making this, I just wanted to say thank you beforehand. I'm already here's the spoiler. I'm already using a lot of roads that asset creator has created. So yeah, that's all I'm gonna say for now. But yeah, stay tuned because primarily around the old town, I think we're gonna have some facelift that I think is gonna look a bit more appropriate. Now, changing subjects for a little bit here. In this episode, we're gonna be doing a lot of parking lot because for the most part, I've been just putting down houses and not a whole lot of parking lot. And the reality is that all these like nook and crannies between the buildings, I've noticed in European cities that are actually used for parking. So that's exactly what I'm going to be doing. Also for this hospital, which is what I was mentioning a second ago, we're going to have a nice, decent size parking lot. Obviously not like American size parking lots, but just enough that we can fit a couple cars and obviously have an entrance for all the ambuli or ambulances, as they'd like to be called, I think. But it was a bit of a struggle, this one, because there is a significant terrain difference. Not a lot, but enough that some of these parking lots are not visible. So I ended up using a combination of keys. And in a second, you're going to see me add a lot of decals to sort of mark the spots. I mean, the parking lots themselves are functional because, you know, that's how they work. But the lines and just everything that makes a parking lot a thing that's visible for the, you know, in the naked eye, you need to add some sort of visual indications. But right next to the hospital, as you can see here, I'm adding this school that is a vanilla asset from the European theme, which, by the way, the police station, the fire station, and the high school here, or the elementary school actually, they're great looking assets. As long as you remove all the unwanted trees and hedges and things, I highly encourage you to use these assets because they do look really, really nice. And one thing I noticed, though, is that as I was trying to move all these buildings from their original location to a little bit outwards or into the road, you know, there's all these like hidden props that I can remove, like the hang around marker. Basically, it tells the game that, hey, like this is sort of a spawn area. I have a bunch of Sims like walking around here. That's kind of how it works. And obviously, since those are invisible, I kind of like didn't really pay that much attention to them. So there are a lot of children playing in the middle of the road. Just so it's perfectly normal. That's fine. In fact, this neighborhood that I'm working on right now, this is where I'm starting to put down all my suburbs. And they tend to have like a parking driveway marker in front of the house. So there's going to be potential. I think I remove all those for the cinematics at least, but there's going to be a lot of cars parking in the middle of the road, like just cutting across the entire lane with their car. So there's that as well. I need to figure out whether or not I want to keep those in the houses or just remove them completely and do or come up with a different solution for parking because those cars still need to park somewhere, especially in the suburbs where we're not going to have a pretty comprehensive tram network or bus service. That's really not a thing that happens in real life. But I'm also using these retaining wall assets that I think are Japanese, or at least that's how they're being advertised in the workshop. That's, by the way, that's a driveway that I was mentioning ago. You see how like it sort of extends beyond the house in the front, so there's a high chance of cars spawning in the middle of the road there. I've only noticed on the narrow roads, not on that big avenue, but we'll get to that in later episodes for sure. Talking about the retaining walls, yes, they look great, and they're not conformed to the terrain, so you can just basically clip them any way you want, and they're not going to cause the glitch, as you can see on the parking lots over there on the top left corner of the screen, where there's like a shadowy thing that's like darker. That's just the terrain kind of glitching out, and for the most part, I'm not like, I leave that as it is. It just adds a little bit more texture. If done right, you can actually use it to your advantage. But in the case of these retaining walls, as you can see there, they look really nice, and with not a whole lot of effort, you can achieve some really good looking things, primarily on this hill right here, which is a little bit too tall, I would say, from in terms of distance from the road below. I think it's still plausible. It's still somewhat realistic, but not necessarily. Like if I had it my way, I would try to like space things out. Or in real life, I think the terrain will look a little bit more smoother there. If that makes any sense. Now over here, instead of just putting down houses all over the place, I decided to sort of keep this area, this central block, as a community garden. There's a whole bunch of community gardens near my house, and obviously I don't live in Europe, I live in the US, but I've seen this in the US. Actually, I've seen a lot of these in Stockholm on my latest trip there, and I know actually something that I've been told in the comments a lot is that Swedish property doesn't necessarily have a lot of fences for the most part. Like houses have like their backyards sort of open. Since this is not based in Sweden, we're not going to have that. There's going to be fences on almost every house, not all of the houses, because I don't think we need to. But at least some houses, especially the ones that are close to the city center that have very clear defined property lines, I do want to add some sort of fence or protection. Also because many of these houses will be sitting on a cliff. So if you don't have anything, any sort of barrier, that could be a hazard. But in terms of this community garden here, I think it came out great. You're going to see it in the cinematics. The last shot of the cinematics actually shows this perfectly. It didn't use a whole lot of props, just a handful. I think in this episode we used like maybe 100, 200 props, which like I said in the previous episode, it gives me hope that we might be able to pull this off in terms of having a pretty detailed city by episode, whatever. I don't know how long this series will be running for, but I think I'm pretty optimistic of the future, if that makes any sense. I mentioned this in the previous episode as well, but we have a bit of a mixed zoning thing going on here. For the most part, these are houses, but once you start branching or going into the city, just a few blocks away from here, there's already some commercial shops. There's mostly residential, because for the first time ever, I'm actually paying attention to the RCI demand at the bottom of the screen. Green means residential, blue means commercial, and orange means industrial or office. So for the most part, obviously I have office in the city. I don't have industrial, but we're gonna have a pretty heavy industrial area in the future. But yeah, this is pretty much it for this episode. As you can see, here's the before and after shot. The timing was a little bit off, so it looks a little bit like a tsunami that's going through the city, but you get the idea. At least you can see the expansion that we just accomplished. And if you enjoyed this episode, please consider getting the like button a click. And if you're new to the channel and haven't already, please consider subscribing as well. You're probably going to find a lot of interesting videos if you like this one on my channel. Just go binge and watch the crap out of everything. But that's all for now. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.